What happens when the person you trust most, the one who shares your life, harbors secrets dark enough to end it? Mark Despain, a successful businessman and loving father, had everything, until his wife's hidden desires and lavish spending spiraled into a deadly conspiracy. How did things go so wrong, and what led to a plot that turned a marriage into a tragedy? Stay tuned as we unravel the chilling details of how greed and betrayal shattered lives, and ultimately, how Mark's own home became the setting for his untimely demise. The crime that unfolded in Jonesboro, Arkansas on August 24, 2011, started as a seemingly tragic event, an ambush of a father of three in his own home. But as the layers peeled away, what emerged was a plot driven by greed, betrayal, and murder. The life of Mark Despain, a 34-year-old successful real estate appraiser, was taken by 2 bullets, leaving behind a haunting story of deception, masterminded by the people closest to him. Mark Despain was a well-regarded man in his community, a father devoted to his family, and a businessman with a thriving real estate venture. He lived with his wife Michelle and their children in an upscale neighborhood in Jonesboro. On the day of his murder, Mark had returned home from lunch, where he had shared ice cream with his wife, unaware that he was walking into a trap. As the ice cream melted on the kitchen table, Mark was gunned down. His wife Michelle made a panicked 911 call, identifying her husband as the victim. Initially, the crime appeared to be a burglary gone wrong, but clues at the scene and testimony from neighbors soon suggested otherwise. Detective Vic Brooks was one of the first to arrive at the Despain household. As he surveyed the scene, certain details seemed odd. For one, valuable items that would typically attract thieves remained untouched. Mark's cell phone was left on the kitchen table, right next to the ice cream he had brought home. It seemed clear that Mark was taken by surprise, but the idea of a random burglary didn't align with the scene Brooks was observing. Someone had staged the scene to look like a robbery, but the meticulousness of the attempt raised Brooks's suspicions. Adding to the complexity, a confrontation was already unfolding outside the house. Mark's father-in-law, Carl Kelly, was screaming profanities at Mark's father, Jack Despain. This open animosity raised immediate red flags for Brooks. Interrogations began the same day. Kelly, in his interview, was quick to suggest that if this was a murder disguised as a robbery, Jack was the culprit. According to Kelly, there had been bad blood between the families for over 5 years. Jack, however, presented a different theory. He believed that Kelly and Michelle were behind the murder. He urged investigators to look at the other side of the family for a motive, hinting at a conspiracy much darker than anyone could have imagined. Mark's life with Michelle had started normally enough. They met when they were young, and after she became pregnant, they decided to marry. Mark embraced not only Michelle but also her daughter from a previous relationship. The couple settled into their life together, with Mark joining his family's real estate business. As Tana, Mark's mother, would later recount, Mark worked hard, but Michelle had expensive tastes. Still, he seemed content to provide for his family, enjoying the fruits of his success. However, all was not well beneath the surface. Tensions grew between the Despain family and the Kelly family, culminating in a family meeting where Mark and Michelle demanded more money from the business. This conversation exploded into a full-blown argument between Michelle and Jack, fracturing the relationship. While both families agreed to part ways business-wise, the bitterness between them remained. The estrangement only worsened when Michelle's teenage daughter accused Jack of forcing her to take nude photos. Mark and Michelle believed the accusations, cutting ties with Jack and calling the police. While no charges were ever filed after the investigation fell apart, the damage to the family had already been done. Mark and Michelle continued with their lives, but Jack could sense that his son's business was suffering. Several of the rental properties Mark managed were facing foreclosure, and tenants were being evicted. Mark, by all outward appearances, continued to maintain his success, but those close to him knew otherwise. What no one outside the marriage seemed to realize at the time was that Michelle had complete control over their finances. She not only worked at a local bank, but also handled the books for their real estate business. What's more, she had been carrying on an affair with a much younger man, a bank employee whom she lavishly supported with Mark's money. As financial pressures mounted, and perhaps sensing that Mark was becoming suspicious, Michelle's solution turned dark: murder for profit. Carl Kelly, Michelle's father, was her co-conspirator in this twisted plot. According to police records, the two exchanged text messages in the lead-up to Mark's murder, discussing the plan to kill him and split the insurance payout. On the day of the murder, Carl was giving a play-by-play of the events as they unfolded. He had even been to Mark's house earlier in the day, dropping off rent money, thus placing himself at the scene. But neither Michelle nor Carl anticipated the police's access to their phone records. Despite their attempts to delete incriminating messages, police forensic experts were able to recover the data, which revealed the details of their conspiracy. On the morning of the murder, Michelle had texted her father, "It has to be today." After Mark's murder, Carl sent updates to Michelle, confirming that the plan was unfolding as expected. The plot thickened further when police received a tip about a man named Terence Barker, known on the streets as Qualo. Barker had been bragging that he was the one who pulled the trigger, killing Mark Despain. Barker eventually confessed to being hired for the hit, though he didn't know Mark personally. He had been recruited by Johnny Hubbard, one of Mark's tenants and a friend of Carl Kelly. Hubbard in turn pointed the finger back at Kelly, confirming that it was Kelly who orchestrated the entire plot. In the aftermath of Mark's death, Michelle continued to act as if she were the grieving widow. She buried her husband and, chillingly, excluded Mark's parents from the funeral. As his family rushed to say their final goodbyes, the police were called to remove them from the scene. It was a cold and calculated move that gave investigators a glimpse into Michelle's true nature. The case against Michelle and Carl seemed airtight, but prosecutors faced challenges. Both Michelle and Carl had alibis supported by surveillance footage. Carl had gone to the bank to visit Michelle around the time of the murder. And another tape showed Michelle and Mark having lunch earlier in the day, even getting ice cream together. Still, the phone records and testimony from Barker, Hubbard, and others tied the conspiracy together. In 2014, Michelle negotiated a plea deal, admitting guilt on 3 counts of hindering apprehension. In exchange, she avoided the capital murder charge and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Michelle waived her right to appeal and became eligible for parole after 5 years. In September 2019, she was granted parole, a decision that left many, including Mark's parents, Jack and Tana, with a sense of incomplete justice. The murder of Mark Despain is a chilling example of how greed and manipulation can destroy lives. The man who had given so much to his family was betrayed by the very people he trusted most. As his ice cream melted on the kitchen table, Mark's life was stolen in a senseless act of violence, orchestrated by those who should have protected him. In the end, the coldness of the crime mirrored the frozen hearts of the conspirators who plotted it. And that's the tragic story of how Mark Despain's life was cut short by the very people he trusted most. A web of lies, financial greed, and betrayal turned a family into suspects and left 3 children without their father. If you found this story thought-provoking, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories that reveal the dark side of human nature.